Greetings. Great Garvey Day to all. This is Brother Maury Kamal, the UNIA historian and international organizer, and I'm here on behalf of the UNIA of London to share a brief message about the Most Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Today we are venerating him, and I know most people have heard of the rise and fall of Mr. Garvey. We don't recognize that. There was no fall. The man who's doing God's work, there is no failure, there's no fall. And Mr. Garvey clearly was on a mission from the Most High God. And so we're going to talk about the incessant elevation, transformation, and exaltation of the Most Honorable Marcus Garvey. And I want you all to keep in mind two questions. Why do we venerate and honor Mr. Garvey? And how should we properly honor Mr. Garvey? For those who are not familiar with him, I'm just going to give you a brief background into his elevation and transformation. Mr. Garvey, born in Jamaica to a mother he considered too good for the world in which she lived, and a father who was a leader of the community and very bright man who had extensive library. He was one of two children out of the 11 children they had, and only two made it to past infancy. And his parents somehow knew something was special about him as a young man. In fact, his mother knew that the child she was going to deliver would one day deliver his race from oppression, and so she decided she wanted to name him Moses, as a leader of his people and a teacher. And his father thought, nah, he's more of a Messiah, an anointed one. So they decided to compromise and come together and call him the Mosiah. So his young Mose was his nickname, began to consume every book in the library of his father's extensive library. It was one of the biggest in St. Anne's Bay at the time. He began to commit the whole dictionary to memory. I mean, this man was an ordinary young man, but he had extraordinary conviction. And everything he did, he succeeded abundantly. He became a young orator and began winning oratory competitions all over the island. He was, at a young age, became apprentice to his godfather, who was a master printer. And eventually, Mr. Garvey, at a young age, as a teen, became a master printer and worked for a government printing press. And he was managing people twice his age. Unfortunately, at that time, a strike had broken out at the printing press, and many of the laborers there weren't getting paid well. So Mr. Garvey is, one of the foremen, didn't have that problem. And so when they went out to strike, he didn't have to strike. He had nothing personally to benefit from it. But he saw that his people were doing poorly and that they needed somebody to back them up. So he decided to throw his lot in with his race. And unfortunately, that cost him because he wound up losing his job when they all gained their job. So anyway, he wound up traveling. There was an earthquake in Jamaica that many people lost their jobs and started traveling. So he wound up amongst that group traveling to Panama and Central America. Costa Rica and some other places. He began managing on the plantation as a timekeeper. And he saw the same conditions in Central America as he saw in Jamaica. A lot of his people were being treated poorly and were suffering. And when he went to the authorities to try to improve their condition and situation, the authorities said, that's your problem. And they had nothing to do to help the people because they didn't think much of the people. So Mr. Garvey, being vexed with this, began to organize in Central America and began to publish a number of newspapers, La Nacion, La Prensa, and unfortunately he got sick and had to go back home to Jamaica. But while he was there, he was thinking about how he was going to fix the problem of his race globally. So he eventually decided to take the fight to the belly of the beast, to take it straight to the UK. And when he got to the UK, he began to travel throughout Europe. He met some good people. His family was, his sister was over there. And he began to, study Birkbeck College. And he began to see the world and what was going on in Europe, and that his people were suffering the same way, even over there as they were in Jamaica and in Central America. So eventually he wound up working, being a publisher and a master printer and all the above. He began working at a newspaper, African Times and Orient Review, more like a magazine, I should say, under Deuce Muhammad Ali. And, he was a messenger, and he used to write articles for the paper, etc. So As he began to, learn and read and study and grow, eventually, he saw the problems of our race was the problem of disorganization. He saw that our problems weren't that we were poor, that we were outnumbered. We were just poorly organized and out organized. And so, in order to fix the problem, we needed superior organization if we wanted justice. As he once said, if we want justice, we must be strong. And if we must be strong, we must come together. And if we must come together, we can only do so through a system of organization. And so, as the idea of organizing his race for their betterment was going around in his head, he read a book by Booker T. Washington called Up From Slavery. In this book, Booker T talks about his ordeal coming out of slavery and he eventually became principal of an industrial school that was teaching members of our race all the crafts, engineering, plumbing, electric, carpentry. We were learning agriculture, medicine, any and every possible profession we could learn that was teaching us how to build and how to develop a nation. And so Mr. Garvey saw this idea that was one of the missing pieces to the puzzle of how to build a movement for improvement that would allow us to be more independent and not dependent upon others to do for us what we can do for ourselves. So the idea that night when he read that book, he started thinking about what was going on, and he claims that the ancestors spoke to him and they were guiding him. They, some of us Garveys believe he kind of spiritually traveled to an Africa future and past, and so we had done and what we could do if we came together. And so when he woke up that morning, the Mosiah was on fire with the desire for empire. When he woke up that morning, he got on the first ship he could, sailing back to Jamaica with a burning idea that's had an epiphany that he had. And on his way back, he met a brother returning to the Caribbean who was coming from South Africa with his Basuto wife. And he began talking about the hardships and conditions going on in Africa as well. So at that stage, Mr. Garvey thought of an idea that would encompass a program to redeem Africa, which he considered not only recovering Africa for the Africans, but rescuing the souls of Africa's sons and daughters from social, political, and economic and spiritual bondage. He began to thinking of a universal program to address the universal problems we had. And so at that point, a name was born, a movement created, and a man became known. And he established the greatest association to ever grace our race, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League of the World. This man came back to Jamaica, started organizing, eventually traveled to the U.S., and much of what is known about him with the shipping lines and the factories and employing thousands and thousands of people throughout the U.S. and throughout the world, organizing auxiliaries and institutions. He saw the White Star Line and figured we could build a Black Star shipping line. He saw the Red Cross serving the rednecks and decided we'd have a Black Cross. And so anything that we needed and that others had, we thought was good enough for ourselves, and we decided to build and had great success. Now, with all that being said, let's go back to why we should venerate Mr. Garvey. Mr. Garvey should be venerated if for no other reason, or I should say we should offer our love to him for no other reason than he first loved us. Mr. Garvey could have easily, and I mean easily, been successful in Jamaica had he not participated in that strike. He could have sat back like a fat rat and just collected all the money he wanted, got him a big old house, 2-3 Model T cars. He could have had the baddest Amy in Jamaica. In fact, not only could he have the baddest Amy, he could have had an Amy, a Jamie, a Mamie, Cockamamie, Puddin' Tammy. He could have had any woman he wanted, or all the women he wanted. But he decided, he's going to throw his lot in with his race. Because he understood if they come for him, them in the morning, or at night, they're going to come for us in the morning. So he understood that none of us are free until all of us are free. And so his sacrifice for his race, his doom of being a leader and organizer of his race, is what caused him to start showing love to us, to teach us and to demonstrate to us how we can best organize ourselves. So First thing I say, we must love him because he first loved us. Second thing I want y'all to keep in mind is that he taught us. This is the man who, when we were just coming out of our enslavement, some of us, had been enslaved for a number of years. This was only 2 generations since that time. And so many of us were mentally still enslaved. Many of us didn't see beauty in ourselves. We didn't see good and righteousness in us. We wanted to be just like the white man or some other person. So Mr. Garvey is the one who came and instilled a sense of dignity and destiny in us, who instilled a sense of pride, who told us that, black skin is not a badge of shame, but a glorious symbol of national greatness. He told us, don't take the kinks out of our hair, take the kinks out of our mind. He taught us that we had divinity to infinity, that we were gods, and that just as God, they say we were created in the image and likeness of him, then we understood that we had to see God as the God of Africa, as a black God. He began to teach us that in seeing a white God of black people had actually deified whiteness and had demonized their own blackness at the very same time. So he taught us many wonderful things about ourselves and how to organize and by precept. But he also taught us through example in building these industries and organizing these political unions and organizing a delegation to go to the League of Nations to fight for Africa to receive the German mandates that had been forfeited during World War I, so that we could have a land of our own, a sovereign land base to build and develop our own industrial and technological revolution in Africa. This man organized delegations to go to Africa and help develop settlements, and engineers and pharmacists and all kinds of people were sent to our homeland to help build. So I mean, the example of having hotels and universities and all sorts of institutions that serve millions of people, it could be done. We didn't think before that we could do it without a white man's permission, but he showed us that we could. So in loving us and in teaching us by precept and example, we should also celebrate and honor and venerate the Honorable Marcus Garvey. But not only did he teach us and first love us, but he also sacrificed for us. This is the man who, upon first coming to the U.S., he attended a church service and sat in the front row, and the preacher saw him sitting in the front row that was reserved for light-skinned Negroes, and he pulled his sleeves up and was ready to start a fight in the middle of the church with Mr. Garvey for sitting on the front row. This is the kind of ridicule he had to endure. When he went traveling and organizing, on one occasion he got stoned. Someone actually threw a brick at him. Later on, he got shot in his office at the Black Star Line, all for trying to help his race. And, not only did he get shot in the leg and the head, he continued to organize, and 3 days later he was bandaged from head to toe and went out and speaking. This man never gave up. This man was thrown in prison in Jamaica, in the United States. He was every chance he had to organize, he took advantage of it, and people tried to punish him for it. Every good deed was punished. And so, even though this was a thankless job, he continued to work. He was exiled. He was persecuted. He continued to work. He suffered things that, some of us have no idea he suffered for the cause, but he'd gladly do it a million times if need be for us. In fact, he told the court that jail can go to hell as far as he's concerned. That Marcus Garvey is fearful of nothing, because men who are earnest are not afraid of consequences. And so he gladly served his race at great sacrifice. And again, he could have just laid back. He didn't need us. We needed him. He could have had that attitude of, I ain't lose nothing in Africa. That's y'all's problem. I'm doing all right. But he didn't take that attitude. He was about, I am because we are. And that's the positive message amongst many messages that he gave us. And so as we see that, there's need in to appreciate and offer our gratitude for his sacrifice, for his teachings, for his love, we begin to understand, how do we best honor him? Through lip service? Do we need to, form a memorial society and talk about, what he did, live in the past? Mr. Garvey said, learn from the past, don't live in the past. We must appreciate what has been done, but we can take what has been done and move into the present. Garveyism is an action word, so we need to start looking at how we can utilize the benefit of his teachings today. So no, it wasn't just about honoring him through talking. Nobody needs to beat Mr. Garvey's drum. Mr. Garvey's accomplishments speak for themselves. In fact, it's a saying that a sharp sword never has to proclaim its sharpness, but he who falls upon the blade will become his greatest advocate. And Mr. Garvey's teachings and philosophy and accomplishments are miraculous, well known all around the globe. So how do we honor Mr. Garvey best? Well, Mr. Garvey was a visionary, a missionary, a serious worker. And the best way you honor a worker is to continue to work. You got to honor the visionary by fulfilling the vision and honor the missionary by completing the mission. So, we're going to bury the man and continue to plan. And the best way today to honor Mr. Garvey is by joining the UNIA right there in London. Join the UNIA. If we ever needed Garveyism before, we sure do need it now. And Mr. Garvey's program, in my opinion, is not only the best program ever designed and constructed, it's the best that ever could be designed and constructed. This logic, his philosophy, his program, the accomplishments, they show us that what we could do if we exercise the same conviction that he had. And so I ask you all today, as you discuss his veneration, discuss some plans of action. Discuss ways of organizing the entire community. I want every member of the race in London to be a member of the UNIA in London. Until we have those kinds of numbers coming in, consolidating our energies and accomplishing everything we will, our work is not done. So, again, I want to just, give a brief message about the most honorable, unconquerable, incomparable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the greatest name our lips can frame, the man who was able to spark the golden age of universal African nationalism and created the most comprehensive blueprint for Black power, again, ever designed and constructed, and who taught us that we can do anything we want. So as I bid you all farewell, I just want to, again, say that may the God in the sky be your only limit, eternity your measurement, buy black, think black, act black, learn the lessons, be strong adherents to the philosophy of the most honorable Marcus Garvey, because it works, it works, it works. And without further ado, I close with the motto of the association: one God, one aim, one destiny, one love.